We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chav Beis, volume 22. This is the Sicha for Yomim Achronim de Chag Pesach, for the second days of the Pesach festival. In this Sicha, the Rebbe discusses the tradition of doing gebroks, matzah shruya, during the last day, the Achron Shel Pesach, while we are so very careful throughout Pesach to not to eat anything that is gebroks, that is shruya, and yet we do mahader. Not only do we allow it, the Rebbe brings down the teshuvah from the Alter Rebbe, which allows it on the last day of Pesach, but the Rebbe asks why the minhag dafke to make sure to use shruya on the last day of Pesach. The Rebbe explains it up in Pnimis Inyonim. Basically, in the Sikha, there is two explanations. One explanation has to do with the idea that after going through already the 7th day of Pesach, matzah shruya is acceptable and should be utilized, representing the idea of matzah is bittul, and this is the level of Metzias, as the Rebbe will explain. So already in a form of matzah shruya, we can use it already, similar to the idea that after the 7 weeks of the Sfiras Ha'omer from Pesach and Shavuos, we dafke have to have chometz to the Shtei Halachem that is brought. That's unique on the Mizbeach, because since all the 7 midas have been worked through, so we should use chometz, as the Rebbe will explain. There is also a whole nother explanation tying it into the actual Achron Shel Pesach itself in the end of the Sikha. We'll go step by step. Let's start from the beginning. Yom Achron de Chag Pesach. Aleph. Benegeya der Zehiris nitzu essen matzah sheruya in Chag HaPesach. As far as being careful not to eat matzah that has been soaked, come in contact with water during Pesach, is Yadua was the Alter Rebbe schreibt in sein Tshuva, so it's known that which the Alter Rebbe writes in his response. Some people thought that this is an extra chumrah. The Alter Rebbe says, no, this is not just as a machmir tove olav bracha. That one who is stringent, let blessing fall upon him, meaning it's appropriate. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that it's not just some sort of outlandish, far-fetched minhag, but taima rabba ika b'milsa. There is great reason in this matter, lizoher michshash isur deiraisa, to be careful of the worry of an isur minatoira. Is dorten euch mevaire de protim. The Alter Rebbe in the Tshuva also explains the details. On his mechalek, he also makes a difference zwischen bishul matzah shenis parero, whether if you're going to take matzah that has been broken up, crumbed up, and you want to cook it, you want to cook matzah, or or put it into the soup. In this case, if you use directly the matzah, and the issue, as the Alter Rebbe explains, that there is some flour left over after you made the matzah, on top of the matzah, he says, you see bechush, you see vividly that there is flour left over. If that flour that went through the process of baking touches water, there is a machlokes whether that could become chametz or not, but there is some deis, as the Alter Rebbe brings down, that could hold that it could become chametz, and on Pesach we need to be machmir according to all the days, so therefore there's a chash isur deraisa directly. But the other issue, that's if you would take the matzah directly and put that into the soup or cook the matzah. But there's also, they make knedlach, they make the Because the Alter Rebbe calls it the igulim, und matzah tuchuna shoisin mimenu igulim. That is when you grind up the matzah. It's not matzah as it is, but you grind up the matzah, you make from it the knedlach, the halkis. But there is no longer any flour be'en. When you grind up, when you make matzah meal from the matzah, there is no flour over there anymore. The flour has been mixed inside of together with the other matzah. So over there, it's an issue that Alter Rebbe explains. On matzah, over there, there's a whole issue about whether tarevis, yovish, belach, b'minay, as the Alter Rebbe brings down over there. And still, that's an issue, and the Alter Rebbe says not to use it. So this is the source for being very careful of matzah shruya on Gibroks on Pesach. But when that is Messiah. However, the Alter Rebbe concludes the tshuva who says, and yet, Yom Tov ha'achrein, on the last day Yom Tov, on achrein shel Pesach, hamekil mishum simchas Yom Tov lo hifsid, one who is lenient because he wants to enjoy Yom Tov. And without Knei Lachi, the Yom Tov joy of the food is not complete. So lo hifsid, it doesn't lose. So the Alter Rebbe allows paskins that one could be mekel on the last day of Pesach, lo hifsid. So we'll see soon what would be the logic why we can do it in the last day of Pesach. But on top of the Alter Rebbe saying that lo hifsid, that you could use it, that it's permissible. He says lo hifsid. But we actually see that the actual minhag is to actually not only allow it, but we're mahader to davke use gebroks. Lepoyula berotman gizen. In actuality, we saw the anhoga for Rabbi Seinu Niseinu, the conduct from our teachers, our leaders, from the Rebbes, as in the Sudas von Achrein Shel Pesach, that during the meals of the last day of Pesach, Pflegen sie nicht nur mekel sein, not only were they lenient, nor euch medagdig sein essen matzah shruya, they were particular to make sure to eat matzah shruya. And while a whole Pesach, they were so careful to the extreme and keep the matzahs covered, that the Rebbe brings down in the note here from the Haggadah Shel Pesach, the minhag on Achar Shel Pesach was dafke to eat matzah shruah. Was oib yeder minhag Yisrael Torah, if every minhag Yisrael is a Torah, that's a lesson that gets the status of a Torah and a lesson, is achas kama, is alachas kama v'kama. So how much more so adosis azoy b'negeya ahanhoga b'pirshum, that this is so when it is a conduct which is public, which is publicized. For Rabbi Seinu Nisiyenu, it's not just a minhag of somebody else, but this is a public conduct of the Rebbes. We should definitely know that this is a Torah. We need to understand, need to learn, and we need to do this as this was in a public forum. If the Rebbes do something privately, that could be a Rebbe thing, as the Rebbe brings down. If they do it occasionally or without doing it in Bitsina, quietly, but this is a public. So this is a lesson. This is something that we should do. So what's the idea? So the Rebbe says that maybe it's not to be taken as trying to be careful, dafke to eat on Achar Shel Pesach, make a point, but maybe the point over here is the Yom Tov. They were very careful to enjoy Yom Tov. Can't enjoy Yom Tov without the Igulim, without the Kneidlach. So, but the Rebbe says if the reason why the Rebbe's were Mahader was because of the Simchas Yom Tov, because of the joy they get from the Kneidlach. So how come we didn't see them being Mahader to eat Kneidlach, other Yom Tov? Joy of Yom Tov is not unique to Pesach. Okay, so here the Alter Rebbe doesn't allow it, but once it comes Achar Shel Pesach, the Alter Rebbe allows it. So there is a joy of Yom Tov over here. But if that's the reason, they would do this in other uh, other Yom Tovs as well. Maybe we should have, perhaps we would be able to explain. As Kavonas Hanagosim is given that the intent of their conduct was to Mahader Zain, to be careful, nit in Achilas Matzah Shruya b'Shaychus Tzachon Shel Pesach. It wasn't about eating Matzah Shruya as it is associated to Achon Shel Pesach, nor in Simchas Yom Tov. It's associated with the idea they wanted to have a joy on Yom Tov. And that's why they did it. You can't explain it this way. Because in addition to this, was by the andere Yomim Tovim hat man bei sie nicht gesehen am Minhag Yitzbe. We did not see a similar minhag to follow this, to have these Kneidlach or Shruya. Und ob zu Simchas Yom Tov, if the reason has to do with the joy of Yom Tov, is does doch shaychlich eure, so then it would seemingly also this is connected euch by Chag HaSukkos, Chag HaShavuos, also by Sukkos and Shavuos, there should be a similar idea. But the Rebbe brings down on the note that you can say that Pesach you're eating matzah already, so Simchas Yom Tov we want to be more lenient instead of eating hard matzah that every other night to eat matzah shruya or kneidlach. But the Rebbe says that it wasn't actually in Hara 8. He says that it came through that Bechlal he had a hard time eating matzah shruya, and on Hara 7 the Rebbe brings down, but also in Hara 8, the Rebbe brings down, it would seem like to get to the greater level of Simchas Yom Tov, they have to sort of take away from the Chumrah of Pesach. So other Yomim Tovim, if it was so about Kneidlach, so other Yomim Tovim would not interfere with a chashash of the Maser Shruya. In any event, so number one, the Rebbe says, in addition, that if it's really about the Kneidlach, it's about the Simchas Yom Tov, and not about Achron Shel Pesach, then we would find it by other Yomim Tovim as well. But the Rebbe says the main thing is that Alter Rebbe Zog Doch. The Alter Rebbe says, Hamoikil Mishum Simchas Yom Tov Lo Hifsid. It doesn't say outright that you can go ahead and eat matzah shruya. No, there's no matzah shruya on Achron Shel Pesach. It doesn't say that. He says one who is lenient did not hifsid, is not losing out. Das heißt, nicht nur ist das akula in der Zihidus was for the sich b'chag Pesach. Not only would this be considered a leniency in being careful, that one needs to be careful on Pesach, and we're saying that he's mekel, nor sees in them, nor was lo hifsid. But all what we're saying is that he hasn't lost. The Alter Rebbe says, first of all, it's a kula, but it's not only a kula. He says he doesn't lose out. But aber nit kein Revach hidur mishum simchas Yom Tov. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that there is a benefit, that this is something we should do because of Simchas Yom Tov, as the Rebbe is trying to explain. If he wants to explain that, that's why the Rebbeim ate it bedavke because Simchas Yom Tov, but that's not really what it says in the Teshuvah. The Teshuvah, he only says you don't lose out, but here we're trying to say that this would actually be a benefit. So the Rebbe says, maybe just to make a difference, to show that the 8th day, the Achron Shel Pesach, is different, to make it different, so that 7 days we don't eat, and on the 8th day we do it. Again, while there is Rebbe brings the example for that would be Sukkah, sitting in the Sukkah on the Shmini Atzeres while we don't make the bracha, and as the Rebbe discussed it more in the Horus, but maybe the Rebbe says, Beis mevot giken zogun, as the Anhoga Hanal is kidei machen achilik veheker, that the above custom is to make a distinction, to make a difference, so you can recognize zwischen Achron Shel Pesach und die Zayin Yomim Shel Lifnei Zeh, and the 7 days that preceded. And Rebbe also in the Haaretz says, but Bechlal, we know that on the 2nd day of Yom Tov, we try not to make any leniencies because people shouldn't think that the 2nd day of Yom Tov is not as chomur. But maybe that would be leniency in the Yom Tov, make less of a Yom Tov observance. But here in Matzah Shruya, that is okay. But the Rebbe says, "Siz aber schwer zu sagen, as l'shem heker alein," that just in order to make a distinction, to recognize Zomen Mahader Zayin, just so you should be very perfection to make sure to es shruya to each shruya. Ubefrat, and the Rebbe says more than that. It wasn't just that they ate shruya. V'mod gizen dan hoge for Rabbi Seinu Nisienu, as we saw the conduct of our teachers, our leaders, the Rebbes, as they have medayig given lishrois, they were particular, specifically, they would soak, they would put b'chol meichel u'meichel. Every food and food, they would make sure to have it shruya by everything that they ate. So it wasn't just to make a heker. If it was done just to make a distinction, but when it gedarft as zayin b'chol meichel, you would not need it to be in every food. Just to make by one food would be sufficient. So what's the reason that they were mehadagdik? So it seems like there is something more, as the Rebbe wants to bring out, that there's a reason that we dafke want to use shruya on Achron Shel Pesach. In Gimel, the Rebbe tries one more over here idea that maybe the reason why the Rebbes were mahader, Rebbe is not talking about why the Alter Rebbe said lo hifsid, but the Rebbe is talking about why did the Rabbeim mahader, and the Rebbe says maybe because we know that when your Rebbe says that something is permissible, you want to make a point to do what he said is permissible just to make the point. That my Rebbe said it's permissible, I'm going to do it that way. And the Gemara, Rebbe brings down for the Gemara in Sukkah that the Talmidim of the Rabacha Berei de Rava, the Talmidim of Rav Kahane would do the hadas exactly like their Rebbe, even though the other way was kosher for sure, but because, as we'll see from the Gemara, famous Gemara that Rebbe always brings down. Let's look inside. So maybe that's the reason they wanted to make that point. And but the Rebbe said the fact that they did it in every food seems like there is something about eating shruya nachar shel Pesach b'pnimis inyonim, as the Rebbe will explain. Let's see inside Gimel. Apipashut yesh leimar. Simply, one can argue, can say, as ibal der Alter Rebbe paskin, since the Alter Rebbe rules as amei kol mishum simchas yom tov lo hifsid, one who's lenient because of simchas yom tov does not lose out. Hotman mitam zagufa. So that was the actually for this reason Mahadir given that they were particular. They made sure to lishreish ba'achrin shel Pesach, to soak, to eat gebroks and achrin shel Pesach, to madgish zayin, in order to emphasize the chidush din v'hoirov and Alter Rebbe, the novelty of this halacha and the lesson, the instruction of the Alter Rebbe to eat matzah shruya. So they dafke wanted to do it. Und al derech, wenn wir gefunden in Gemara, this would be similar as we find in the Gemara. As Ravacha berei de Rava, Mahader atrei v'chad. Ravacha, the son of Rava, he would be particularly when he would look for a hodos that needs to have three leaves. So he would be careful that it should be 2 and 1 instead of all three coming out of the same stem. He would nem the trei v'chad. Nemen ahodos. He would take a myrtle, that it only has 2 leaves coming out of the same stem, and one of them is below it that goes up and rides on the 2, covers the 2 of them. Even though it's not 3 from one stem, it's 2 and 1. That is as the opinion of Rav Kahana. Now, Rav Kahana didn't insist that it has to be 2 and 1. Over Rav Kahana said, even if you have 2 from one stem and 1 below it, is kosher. Und losa bechad kino kolskein de kosher. And of course, all 3 come from the one stem is certainly kosher. So why would Rava, Ravacha Berei Rava, why would he insist or be mahader to look dafke for a hodas that has 2 and 1, where 3 is for sure kosher? Since this has been came out from the mouth of Rav Kahana that is kosher, his student was mahader in this. So since the Alter Rebbe says it's okay to eat matzah shruya on Achar Pesach, so the Talmud wants to be mahader. But the Rebbe says the fact that they did it after, before every meal, is a siman, is mashma, that it's not just because to do what the Rebbe want, but something again to do with Achar Pesach eating shruya. For them, the fact that they did it in every food that they ate is moving. It's understood. Hados is nit nor mitzadam tam. This is not just because of the reason from Hoil Venofik Mepume, the Admor Hazokin. Since this has come out of the Alter Rebbe's mouth, he ruled that it's okay Achar Pesach to have the Sharuya, and that's why they were mahader to do it. No, those hot, the fact they did it in every food, no, those hot ashaychus, but this has a connection. Is negayet some etzem inyan from Achar Shel Pesach. This is important to what Achar Shel Pesach is. Ubemela to alle seine Protim, and therefore it associated all the details. It's connected to Achar Shel Pesach. All the details, every food that we eat there. Koilo macholim, also food. So the idea of Shiruya, the idea that Alter Rebbe rules is connected to all food. Okemedubar amol in the Mdiu Kaloshen Minag Yisrael Torah. Spoken in the past, what is the precise language that we say a Minag Yisrael Torah? We could say that a custom of Yidden is a law, but you can say that Minag Yisrael halachahi dinhi, that meaning that you have to do, If we're just trying to say that it's Toirahi, that it's something that you must follow, you must observe, it's not just a minhag that you can sort of put to the wayside, then it would not have to use the Lashon. This precise Lashon of Toirahi means also a lesson. In addition to being something that you have to follow, it is a lesson. Ados is nit nor azach was hot a toike from Torah. We're trying to tell it it's not only that this is an item that has the force of Torah, which will be al derech mineg aviseinu b'yodenu. The tradition of our fathers is in our hands. That's one saying. So we would say that's a minig is like that. Minig Yisrael is we should follow. Or al tishanum minig aviseichem. Don't change from the tradition of your father. Uketshuvas harash b'hayidua, as the Rashba's famous response to it. He says that even older women, noshim skenis, we should also follow. So that would just mean if the lashon would not be Torah here, but minhag Yisrael you have to follow. That would just mean that it's something which is important to do. You can't just put it away and not do it. But the language that I've explained of Torah nor der minhag is oicha Torah hayra, but actually you should pay attention to the minhag. That becomes actually a lesson. It becomes a Torah hayra. This shows, this minhag shows this special idea, the contents when we do this minhag. In our case, this minhag of eating matzah sheruya, dafke, mahader, and Pesach points to that points to the special content, the special idea, the unique idea of Achron Shel Pesach, and that is associated from the fact that we eat sheruya, that points to, and therefore all the details in all of the food. So in Ois Daled, the Rebbe will explain the difference between chometz and matzah. Chometz represents humility. Matzah represents holiness. We see on Pesach, chometz is prohibited. But on the other hand, on the Shavuos, chometz must be brought as the mincha, the shtei halechem, that is matter everything. And the reason is because in the beginning of the Avodah, it must be only matzah, must be total humility. Any sense of self, any sense of haughtiness of chometz is not acceptable. But after the 7 weeks, once one has sorted out, one needs to serve Hashem also with that level of chometz, because the has to be vayikba liba v'darke Hashem, being a person being strong, as the Rebbe will explain over here. Dalut v'yesh loymar. The Nekudas Habir Bazeh, we can say the point of the explanation b'pnimius inyonim, in the inner matter of things. Says Yedua der Chelek zwischen Pesach and Shavuos b'negei chometz. It's known the difference between Pesach and Shavuos as it is associated to chometz. As b'Pesach, on Pesach is chometz asur b'tachlis. On Pesach, chometz is prohibited totally. Shavuos, and Shavuos is chometz, nit nor mutter chometz. Not only are we allowed chometz on Shavuos, nor adarabah achiyu. On the contrary, over there it's an obligation. The shtei halechem b'Shavuos, the 2 breads on Shavuos, darf und zayin davke, as the pasuk says, those 2 breads need to be chometz tei ofeno. They should be baked chometz. And not only are they bechames, when you say them, they ver namatir far menoches matzis. All year round, all the minchas that we bring from the flour need to be matzah. We don't make them chametz. So the chametz that we bring on Shavuos Pesach, you cannot bring from the new the new flour for the menoches before you bring the shtei halechem. So the menoches are made out of matzah. What permits them is the shtei halechem, which is made out of chometz. So you see, the chometz is the necessity that on Shavuos we have to have chometz over there, and that is what permits also the menoches, which are matzah. How come? So what's the explanation about this is Chometz Vaistoi V'Hagbo V'Hisnasus. Chometz points to rising and haughtiness. Bos is der Mocker von Kol Mineira. That is the source of all types of negativity, of bad, of evil. Und der Far is Pesach, and that's why. When we're talking about Pesach, when men halt erst by Yitzias Mitzrayim, when we're just at the point, we're just going out of Egypt, Muz men damult antleifen von Chometz, then we must run away from Chometz. Bis to the Meifen, to the extreme, von lo yiro lo yimotze, it can't even be seen or can be found. We know that on Pesach, not only you eat or benefit, you can't even have it, possess it. Lo yiro lo yimotze. But as opposed to when it comes already to Shavuos. That comes after the service of counting of the Eimer. Then when we sort out all the 7 emotions of the animal soul, each emotion, not just in a general way, but all the details. 7 times 7 emotions, and each emotion, all the details. Dan is Chometz nit nor kein stira zu avodas Hashem. Then Chometz not only does it not conflict to the service of Hashem after the sorting out, after accomplishing 7 times 7, the sorting out of the Nefesh HaBahamis, but adrabe, men stay down in a matzev, but then you're already standing in a condition amizdem chometz gufa ken mens, that you are able to, with that chometz, you're able to make a darfen. Once you're able to, then you have to oifton in avodas haTorah umitzvos, to accomplish in the service of Torah mitzvahs with the chometz itself. Similarly, we have the idea his heart has become haughty, raised in the ways of Hashem, to serve Hashem with the chametz. So there is that level. Pesach, you got to run away, but after 7 weeks that you've already sorted out, over there you are able to, and therefore need to work with the chametz. The ultimate elevation is to turn darkness to light. As men zol dem choshech gufem hapech zayin le'oir, that you should take darkness itself and turn that into light. Und der Far darf b'shvuos zayin chometz davke teofeno. And that's why in Shavuos we need to bake it with chometz, because chometz davke, specifically chometz to bake it, because we are already able to handle it, and therefore we have to handle it, because we have to make his hapcha, we have to turn darkness to light and serve the Eibishter, even with our chametz, even with the Hagboah, because vayigba li b'dark Hashem, to bring that into the service of Hashem and turn things around. So that is the explanation between Shavuos and between Pesach and Shavuos. And the Rebbe explains now that this is actually, to a certain extent, happens on Achron Shel Pesach, because the Sfiras HaOmer has already gone through the 7 days of counting of the Sfira from Chesed Shebechesed. When it comes the 8th day, Achron Shel Pesach, already at that time you can handle to a certain extent the chametz, or the chametz which is, so to speak, in the shruya. Let's look inside. Hey, al pizeh is move on. Based on this, it's understood as mein zeh is oich ba'achrin shel Pesach. Similar to this, somewhat of this idea of Shavuos is already an achrin shel Pesach. B'shas men hot shoin ba'achrin shel Pesach. Gezählt, mevarer given alle 7 Sfiras, that on Achron Shel Pesach, we start counting from the day after Pesach, from the second day of Pesach. So on Achrin Shel Pesach, you already counted Mevarig alle sieben Spheres. You already counted, sorted out 7 Spheres, Midas. Von der Erster, okay, it's only from the first, because we're doing Chesed first, all the details of Chesed. Von der Erster. But but this is the main Sphira, Umida. As we know, the Osilim Kulayomi, with all days, with all spheres, comes along the Midas HaChesed. So Chesed is the main, the first and the main of all spheres. We've already sorted out, we've counted all the 7 details of the Midas HaChesed. Chesed was the Achre Kuman de Sude, so you already do Sphira, so, and also after you count Sphira, Kuman de Sudes for Achre Shel Pesach, Sudes Halaylu, Sudes Hayoim. So, in other words, you didn't go through the whole day, but that day is already after you counted. The Sudas von Achren Shel Pesach, Sudas Halaylav, Sudas Hayoim, the Sud of the night, the Sud of the daytime. Man hat schon gepoilt a birur in Amida. You already impacted a sorting out of a motion of a one Mida, und in einem Klau von alle 7 Midas, and in the generality, you actually impacted all 7 midas as they are part of midas chesed. Vizishtein in chesed, as they are standing in chesed. Chesed shebechesed, gvura shebechesed, v'chulu. So you've already touched every midah, yeah, with the way they are in chesed. Is choch as men halt noch dan nicht by der darge von Shavuos. Although we are not yet by the level of Shavuos, as von Chometz Gufa. Zomen oifton an inyan shel kedusha mitzvah, that from chametz itself you should do kedusha mitzvah. You're not allowed to eat chametz on Shel Pesach. We're not at that level. Vibald es is noch nit given der birur proti, since there was not this specific sorting out from protius amidis, from the individual midas. Kim klul kol echad klul mezayin. How's each one is included of 7? We're just by the first week. We haven't touched the other 6 midas, and as they are one included from all the 7. So therefore, but at that point, we don't need to be as stark in the avodah of matzah. You don't have to be so careful in the service of matzah, lechem oini, which is the poor man's bread, bittul v'skafia, self-negation, subduing yourself, not so much in the matzah, to protect it even from a worry of chametz matzah shruya. We don't need that anymore. That time, at that point, you already have potentially the power to utilize in the service of Hashem also something which is not totally subjugated and low. So for that reason, since we already have the ability to deal with it, with with the level, with not total bittul shiftless. So since we can deal with that, my time is about mahodem koyach tondos. That since we have the power to do this, darfman doston, then you need to do that. Und therefore, is mahader b'matzah shruya. We are careful of matzah shruya. Bis as dos is kipshute, till it comes very literally. Dachilas hashruya mach the mitzvah for simchas yomtiv. That eating the shruya makes up the mitzvah of simchas yomtiv. We're using this shruya to make simchas yomtiv. That's the ishapcha already from the shruya level of chametz. They can eat chametz, but not so careful in shruya, and we use matzah shruya to bring about the level of Simchas Yom Tov to turn it around into a mitzvah. And the Rebbe is going to say now that even from the Torah perspective, the last day of Pesach, Bechlal, okay, Achar Shel Pesach is only Midrabanan, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Goliath, but Bechlal, the seventh day of Pesach, which Achar Shel Pesach is part of it, we also find the matzah being less of the matzah, which is on the first day of Yom Tov. And we learn out that matzah is a rishus. We know the first night of Pesach, you have to eat. So matzahs, you have to eat. Be'erev techlu matzahs, you have to eat matzah the first night of Pesach, but the rest is a rishus. We learn it out from the seventh day. It shows us, even in the Torah, that the last days of Yom Tov are not as the strength of the first day of Yom Tov. The Rebbe will bring out now in Ois Vav. Vibald as alle inyone der Rabbanon nemen sich von Torah. All matters of the ordained by the Rabbanon come from Torah. Whenever the rabbis institute something, they follow and they do it similar as the Torah instituted. We can say similarly also in our case with regards to Shvi Shel Pesach not being at the level requirement of once you've gone through 7 days, have the same stringency as it's in the beginning. As oder teuchen va'oifun v'achilas matzah b'achron shel Pesach, that also this contents, the way we eat matzah on achron shel Pesach, nimmt sich, it comes from, und is me'ein, and is similar von dem Inyan va'oifun von achilas matzah mid'oraisa b'shvi shel Pesach, from the idea and the way we eat matzah from the Torah on the seventh day of Pesach. Over there too, we'll see that there is already a sort of a relaxation from the matzah as it is in the beginning, the way it's in Achon Shel Pesach. The explanation is from Posik Sheishes Yomim Toichal Matzis. In the pasuk it says, "Eat 6 days matzahs," and on the seventh day it should be atzeres, stopping the work for Hashem your God. Let it man up. So from this we learn out ma shvi rishus, just like the seventh day is optional. Av sheishes yomim rishus, meaning whether there is an obligation to eat matzah, because the Torah only says eat matzah for 6 days. It doesn't say 7 days. So what is Bayem Hashvi? But we're saying 7 days, you don't have to eat matzah. So we learn up, Mashvi Rishus, just like the seventh day is optional because it's not part of the 6 days. Av Sheishes Yom Rishus, the 6 days are also optional. This means, what does this mean? Hasagam al zibun teg, even though all 7 days, chutz the Yom Tov al the Pesach, with the exception of the first night of Pesach, zenen gleich in them din von reshus, they're all similar in the din of optional. All 7 days, one is not obligated to eat matzah, can't eat chametz, but not obligated to eat matzah. So they're all equal. Vibald ober has learned us up from Shvir Shel Pesach, but since where do we learn this from? Is from the seventh day of Pesach. Is move on is understood as the Ikera Inyan from the Rishus is B'Shvi Yishal Pesach. We're saying about Shvi Rishus, the main idea of optional is Shvi Yishal Pesach. From Shvi Yishal Pesach, and from Shvi Yishal Pesach, that is nimshach on Eivgiton, it extends and it accomplishes in the andere Sheshis Hayomim from Pesach and the other 6 days of Pesach. So basically, the main Rishus is on the 7th day, and from it, because over there the Torah never obligated it. But how do we know that the Sheshis Yomim are not obligation? Because the 7th day is optional. Is Mavur in Chassidus, so in Chassidus is explained. As those was B'Shvi Shal Pesach is Achilas Matzah Rishus. Why is on the 7th day of Pesach eating matzah optional? Is dos Limal Yusuf. That shows an advantage. It's not lacking that we don't have to eat matzah, but this is actually a greatness. Dos Gufavas dos is Rishus. The fact that this is optional, Bavais as the Achilas Matzah for Shvi Shal Pesach. This points that eating matzah on the 7th day of Pesach, der line noch hecher, that this can reach even higher, wie die Madrege, than the level was verder grave to Achilas Matzah that is reached by eating matzah, b'layla harisha versus choiva on the first night, which is obligation, mandatory. The fact that on Shvi Shal Pesach matzah is optional means, and it points to the fact that eating of matzah, the optional matzah, actually can reach that you eat the Shvi Shal Pesach into a higher place than even the matzah that you're obligated to eat on the first night of Pesach. It seems like if it's optional, how could it be higher? So Al Derech, the Rebbe says, so we similar with the Inyan for Tfilas Arvis Rishus. We say that the prayer of Ma'ariv is optional, and yet it has the advantage that you can't obligate it, but it's something which is on a higher madrega that you don't even have to command it. It's not mandatory. And because it's sometimes when something is such a high madrega, we can't expect that. We can't tell you a command that you have to do that because this is too high to instruct you. But when you do it, you actually reach the higher madrega. Just like by Ma'ariv, that if you do it, you actually reach the high madrega, but you can't command on it. That's why it was optional. Kishem v'dosis in their pu'ula of hamshocha milmaylo, just as it is in the impact and what comes down from above. Al derech zeh is moving b'avodas adam. Similarly to this, it's also understood in the service of man. Achilas matzah shel chayva. When you're eating matzah, we're saying it's an obligation or their mitzvah or a mitzvah vice at this point. As mitzat koiches atzmai halt noch nit by der avodah for matzah lechem. That shows that he on his own koiches is not yet by the level, the service of matzah lechem. You need somebody to command you, to tell you to do it. Bittul v'iskafia, subjugation and subduing, you need a mitzvah to eat the matzah, to be that. Und der Pfarrer wird auf ihm aufgelegt von Chiv und mitzvah, and that's why it's placed upon him in a way it becomes an obligation, it becomes a mitzvah. Soll sein Säuer in them, be careful with the matzah. In der Inyan von Rishus, as opposed to the idea that it's optional, that you do it on your own, as melostes iber zu sein rotzen, that you allow this to the person's wishes, wants, what he wants to do, is as abavais, that is evident, that proves as men farlos him, that you rely on him. Das heißt, als man darf ihm nicht hitten und ihm mechayiv sein in der Zehiris v'avodah von Bittul, that you don't need to watch him and obligate him to be careful and in the service of Bittul. Die avodah von Achilas Matzah is schön geworden an Inyan. The service of eating matzah is already became an idea of was ken wird allein durchführen, that he's able to, and he will do it himself. We don't have to tell him to do it. We don't have to warn him and caution him, because he's already at that level, and we can rely on his ratzon. Das ist verbunden mit dem, but das ist Shvi Shal Pesach, and that's associated because it's the seventh day of Pesach. Derech v'geret frier ba'achron shel Pesach. Similar to what discussed earlier when we talked about the Achron Shel Pesach. As weil mahalt shoin beim Zählen die siebete Sphira, since we're counting the seventh Sphira, Siyum habirur von der erster von alle sieben miris, the end of the sorting out of the first of all the seven emotions. Steht mir schon in a Matzev bedarge zu kennen und darf man hatte sein bematzev shruya. So we already are standing in a condition, in a level that we're able to, and then we have to be careful of matzev shruya then, because we're able to turn things around already in Achron Shel Pesach once we've up to the seventh emotion. Al derech ze b'shvi Shel Pesach. Similar is on the seventh day of Pesach. Zayin dig the zibeter tog from the Zman. So it's not Svira here, we're still in the sixth Svira, but it's already the seventh day from the time when Nigla, Aleya Melech Malcha Amlochim HaKodesh Baruch Hu Ba'atzmei Go'olam, that the Eibishter, King of Kings himself, revealed himself and redeemed them, was their far is Lo Hispik B'tzekas Aviseinu Lahachmitz. And that's why the dough did not have the opportunity to be chometz. So it came milmailo, and it wasn't a chance for it to become a chometz stick. Verdan by Yom HaShvi. So then that level that started off, and it came milmailo like a tzivui, that was lohispik, but nigla aleim. Verdan b'yem hashvi oder gilui from them lo hispik v'gomer. So then that revelation that it didn't have a chance, vertat seres, comes hold up, absorbed, niklat b'pnimis b'yed inyan in. It becomes incorporated and absorbed in the inside by every yid. Und der Fahr is damot achilas matzah norishus. That's why the achilas matzah then is only optional. Okay, so that shows us that also in the Torah there's a difference between the seventh day, which is the main optional, because all the 6 day optionals we learned from the seventh day, that's the main optional time of matzah, because at 7 days we already reached that level. But yet the Rebbe is going to explain there's still a difference between the seventh day Shvi and Achron Shel Pesach, in which we are actually using the matzah shruya, Zayin. Says aber move on us is da achilik zwischen Shvi Shel Pesach und Achron Shel Pesach. There's a difference between the seventh day of Pesach and the last day of Pesach. B'Shvi Shel Pesach is those der zibeter tog from Yitzias Mitzrayim. Shvi Shel Pesach is the seventh day of the exit of Egypt, durch Nigla Aleim. That came through Hashem revealed himself to them. Damult is gekumen der gilu milmaila. 7 days from when the revelation came from above. Vidos is given kipshute, and the way it actually took place, literally as Bikriyas Yamsov is given der Gemar from Yitzias Mitzrayim. It was the conclusion of the exodus of Egypt. Until the splitting of the sea is noch given emas Mitzrayim aleim. The fear of the Egyptians was still on the Yidden. So it really concluded even literally with Yitzias Mitzrayim on the 7th day of Pesach. Bishah says he's gekumen der zibeter tog, when the 7th day came, is der Gilui Milmaila geworden beoifen. So that revelation that comes from above, it was in such a way, Shalat Seres Viklita, it was absorbed, it stayed held in and it was absorbed. and therefore this impacted the saying of the song by the Yidden. The river is der inyan von achilas matzah by zei, and therefore the eating of matzah by them shem biklita bipnimia, so that has been absorbed in their inner rishus canal, has become optional because at this point they have already absorbed that gilui that came milmaila. Masha'enken achron shel Pesach is there zivit talk for Sfiras Omer, but achron shel Pesach is the 7th day of counting the Omer. The avodah mitzad mato, that's the 7th day of the work from below. The birur from the mention in Zayin Zibun Midas, that's the sorting out, the human being sorting out his 7 emotion. As it was literally in the first time. As B'yitzias Mitzrayim Habun, the Yidden Mitzad Atzmam, that when they went out of Mitzrayim, the Yidden on their own, Ongeben Zelen the Tag, to Kabbalah Satoira, they started counting the ways. That was their initiative. Started from the day after Pesach, they started counting the days to Kabbalah Satoira when they're going to receive the Torah. Then as Vet Zayin, der Tabdun es holikim al horazeh, you will serve Hashem on this mountain. Is b'shas mekum choin zum zibuten tog from Sfiras avodas hamato. So when we come to the 7th day of the counting and the service of below, is done the avodah von achilas matzah. So then the service of eating matzah, bitla yeshes, the negation of one's yeshes, oneself, nit not an inyan for rishus. Not only is it idea of optional, nor mekenshin essen, but you can eat, we are actually careful to eat matzah shruya. Was hotach shash chometz has a worry of chometz, we're going to eat it. Var mizmaila oich di beginnen avodas Hashem kinal, because we also elevate that level in the service of Hashem kinal. As I said earlier, we make the mitzvah, we make the simchas yom tov from this matzah shruya. In Ois Ches, the Rebbe is going to explain that there is also an inherent connection to eating matzah shruya and achron shel Pesach, because achron shel Pesach represents the time of Mashiach. And in the time of Mashiach, the Ra will not be there as compared to the Gulas Mitzrayim, in which we say Kiborach Ha'am, that they ran away, but by Shvi Shel Pesach, and then the Rebbe is going to extend it to Achron Shel Pesach. The Rebbe is going to also extend it to the Shvi Shel Pesach to a certain extent, that in Eretz Yisrael, Shvi Shel Pesach is Achron Shel Pesach in the connection with Mashiach. We'll look inside. Nois Ches. Thus is Blois Abir, what we explained till now is only an explanation in Aprat von Achrin Shel Pesach, in a detail of Achrin Shel Pesach. That Al Sazman, that we explained, this is a time when me is mashlim disviro birur, when we conclude the counting and the sorting out from the erste, the first zibun midois svira is the chesed from sfiras oimer, from the first one of the 7 emotion of the sfiras of chesed of sfiras oimer, we conclude that on Achron Shel Pesach. Es is ober muvan, but it's understood that there is more, that as der minhag von mahadrim lishra is the custom from those who are perfection to do the mitzvah in the perfection, to dafke, to brooks, to soak and make their matzahs wet, hot hashayches to minyan for Achron Shel Pesach, that has a connection to the idea of Achron Shel Pesach at Tog. It's a day was kishmoi kenhu, as the name we say Achron Shel Pesach is Messiah Mumashlim dem Yom Tov. It concludes and completes the Yom Tov from Zman Cheruseinu Chag Pesach, from the Yom Tov, the time of our freedom, the festival of Pesach. Achron Shel Pesach completes it. Val derech zeh, the Rebbe will add later on B'negei Shvi Shel Pesach to the time of Shvi'ah Shel Pesach Kidla Kamon, as the Rebbe will later on explain this. On Shvi'ah Shel Pesach as well. So first the Rebbe is explaining the Achron Shel Pesach, wird man das verstehen behagdim. So we'll understand this by introducing the Wort von Tzemach Tzedek, the word, the expression that the Tzemach Tzedek said, was Kveit Kidushas Meiri Chomer Admur, that my father-in-law, the Rebbe, bringt seine Sichas, he brings it down in his talks. And he says like this, the letzter Tag Pesach ruft man mit dem Nomen Acharon Shel Pesach. The last day of Pesach, we call it with the name Acharon Shel Pesach. Das heißt, that means as Acharon Shel Pesach, that the Acharon Shel Pesach, the letzter Tag von Pesach, the last day of Pesach, is der Siyum, that is the conclusion, the finish. Von dem, was es hat sich eingeheben, der erste Nacht von Pesach, from that which began on the first night of Pesach. And we're going to compare what started in the first night of Pesach is Yetzias Mitzrayim. What ends the Yom Tov of Pesach is the future redemption. The erste Nacht Pesach, the first night Pesach is unser Yom Tov. That's our holiday. Was HaKadosh Baruch Hu hat uns ausgelöst von Mitzrayim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu freed us, redeemed us, took us out of Egypt. The Geula Rishona, that was the first redemption. Durch Moshe Rabbeinu, through Moshe, our teacher was Eris given der Goyel Rishon. He was the first one to redeem us. That was the first night, the first day of Pesach. Das is given der Onev. That was the beginning. Acharon Shel Pesach is unser Yom Tov of der Geula Acharona. But the last day of Pesach, the end of Pesach, is our Yom Tov on the last redemption. Was HaKadosh Baruch Hu wird uns auslösen von dem Golus Achron. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will redeem us from this last exile durch Mashiach Tzidkenu, through our righteous Mashiach. Was Mashiach Tzidkenu, Mashiach Tzidkenu, is der Goyel Achron. He is the last redeemer. Der erste Tag Pesach is Moshe Rabbeinu Simcha Tag. The first day of Pesach is Moshe Rabbeinu's joyous day. Und Acharon Shel Pesach is Mashiach Simcha Tag. And the last day of Pesach, that's Mashiach's happy day, the rejoicing day for Mashiach. And this is not just the expression of the Tzemach Tzedek in the association from Acharon Shel Pesach with the Mashiach, with the Geula HaSida, with Mashiach, that's actually connected, right? We find in the Haftorah that we read, was der Inyan, this idea, as Acharon Shel Pesach is verbunden with the Geula HaSida, that the last day of Pesach is associated with the future redemption, is merumas. This is hinted v'ali inyonim from pnimius HaTorah, as all matters of the inner part of Torah, which this is case, what the Tzemach Tzedek said, it's hinted, Eich benigla the Torah, also in the revealed part of Torah. The Haftorah from Acharon Shel Pesach, the Haftorah of the last day of Pesach is Oid Hayoim. The pasuk talks about Ben Mashiach, that Oid Hayoim Godel, that the will be the as the pasuk discusses in the Acharon Shel Pesach, v'yotzo choyter megeza yishoy, that from Mashiach, as the whole Haftorah discusses over there, that we read in Acharon Shel Pesach. Was die Haftorah red ba'arichus wegen der Geula HaSida al Yidei Mashiach Tzidkenu. This Haftorah speaks at length about the future redemption through Mashiach Tzidkenu. Und wegen die Prote Hayud was well und dann mekuyim werden about the specific details of the promise that will be fulfilled when Mashiach will come. So we read it in Achron Shel Pesach. This is Mevuer, bekam mit Roshi Chazal, und euch gebracht in Rambam that has articulated in many of the expounding medrashim of our sages of blessed memory, and also as brought down in the Maimonides in Rambam, wegen der Hanhoge b'Mois HaMashiach, the pasuk discusses in the Haftorah, was wird sein in einem Eufel von Gor Zeiv im Keves, and these, as the pasuk says, Kimola Oretz, the Rambam says, Kimola Oretz Deyes Havaya, the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. Wegen dem Kibbutz Goliath also discusses about the ingathering of the exile, which is Metuer in the Psukei HaHaftorah, which is described in the verses of the Torah. It says, V'hoyo b'yoyim hahu, that on that day, that Yosef Hashem Shenis Yodei Liknois Es Shor Amoy Asher Yishol Ma'ashur Mitzrayim Umei Hayom. The pasuk continues there. The Eibishter will gather the kibbutz Nitche Yisro, which the Rambam mentions, are all based on this pesukim that we read in the Haftorah of Achron Shel Pesach. So we see a very clear association. The Rebbe brings down also the note over here that even though the Shulchan Aruch brings down the reason we read it is because the Mapol of Sanhedrin was on the night of Pesach, but that was really on the first night of Pesach. So the fact that we read it on Achron Shel Pesach points to a clear connection to the Mashiach, that this is, as it said, the Simcha Tog of Mashiach, as the Tzemach Tzedek said. Ukiyadua, as it's also known, as the Baal Shem Tov lekt sich neig sein zu essen drei Su'udes Achron Shel Pesach, that he had the tradition to eat 3 meals on Achron Shel Pesach, und die dritte Suda was is given lifnois Erev, and that last meal, which was towards the evening on Achron Shel Pesach, hat men gerufun Su'udas Mashiach, that was referred to, that was called the meal of Mashiach. Und das is mitam hanal, this is because of the reason of above, while Ba'achron Shel Pesach is made Gilu Horas HaMashiach, because on Achron Shel Pesach, as the Tzemach Tzedek says, then we have the revelation of Horas HaMashiach, Mashiach Simchat Tov, and therefore we have Mashiach Suda by the Baal Shem Tov, and the Haftorah then is read about Mashiach. And this, that the last day is considered associated with Mashiach and the first day with Mitzrayim, gives us also an explanation to the previous idea why on Achron Shel Pesach we use Shiruya, because in the time of Mashiach there will be no more negativity, so we don't have to worry about the Shiruya. Let's look inside test. Achiluk kloli zwischen die zwei Fane Geula. A general difference between these two types of redemption. The first redemption by Mitzrayim through Moshe Rabbeinu, and the redemption Geula Hasidah through Mashiach, the Geula Rishona for Mitzrayim and the Geula Acharona Hasidah Lova, between the first redemption of Egypt and the last redemption that is destined to come. By Yitzias Mitzrayim states, what's the difference, general difference? By Yitzias Mitzrayim state, the people have run away, because it was a situation that they had to run away. The bad, the evil that was in the Jewish souls was still, the Alter Rebbe, according to the Tanya, was still, Adayin Hoye B'Tok was still in full force. They needed to run away. hat man darüber gemusst antläufen von Ra. They needed to run away from the evil Tumas Mitzrayim, the impurity of the Egyptians. Und in dem Matze haben sich die Eden gefunden bis Kriyas Yamsu B'Shvi Shel Pesach. That condition, the Jews found themselves until the splitting of the sea and Shvi Shel Pesach. This is verstandig euch von Pashtus Yonim, as understood also from the simple matters as it took effect, that the Jews were afraid for the Egyptians to come until the splitting of the sea, when they got rid of them once and for all. As bis demelt until the Kriyas Yamsuf is noch given Amos Mitzrayim Aleim Kenal, the fear of the Egypt was on them, as said before. Und and therefore, that's a result because of we still have the negativity and we have to run away. The Torah says you can't eat on the Korban Pesach, you can't have on Pesach the chometz, shivas yom techel matzahs. You have to eat 7 days matzahs, lechem oini, the poor bread, ki b'chiposin yotzosum mitzberes mitzrayim, because you went out with haste from the land of Egypt. You eat matzahs. As dar zayin is hirus gedoylo from chometz. It needs to be the great care. Be very careful from chometz, u'b'chiposin, and in a haste barach to run away. And the avodah for matzah lechem needs to be the service of matzah, which is the poor man's bread, bittul v'hiskafia, that needs to be subjugation and subduing. This is as far as the Geulas Mitzrayim. In the Geula Achroina la'osid love state, but in the redemption of the last redemption, in the future to come, state loy b'chipozin teitzeyu. You will not go out in haste. Varum. Demult vetzayin vesruach hatuma avir min haaretz. The spirit of impurity I will remove from the land. Sinitoke mitzius fun ra. There is no existence of evil, untuma, and impurity from welchem zal daarvan antleven, from which you need to run away. Bald as achren shel Pesach is a yontev verbunden mit der Geula Hachrona. Since Pesach is a holiday which is associated, tied to the later last redemption, usizdan meir ha'oras hamashiach, and on achren shel Pesach there is the shine of, it lights the shine of Mashiach. The riber darf nicht sein the zehiris. That's why there doesn't need to be the care and so careful for matzah shruya, from the gebroks, from matzah that has been soaked. Mishteit hecher derfunu canal, you're above it, and I said before, because we have to deal with in a higher level. And the Rebbe is going to say in you, not only aren't we supposed to be so afraid and worry about Matzah Shruya, but we have to turn it over and make the Simchas Yonta for the Matzah Shruya, as in the Haftorah, that in days of Mashiach, they will turn around some of the negativity and use it into some positive as well. Yud Nochmer. In the Geula Achreina, in the few last redemption, is Noise versus Vetzich Oifsfirun. Der Inyan von Ves Ruach Hatum Avir Min Haaretz, that in addition that it will be accomplished, that the spirit of impurity I will remove from the land, as es vet mernit sein the Metzias von Ra, that there will not be any evil existence, nor as vet sich euch öfton der emeser inyan von is habcha, but it will be the turnaround, the true idea of things turning around. Und wie man sagt in der Haftorah von Achren Shel Pesach, as we say in the Haftorah of Achren Shel Pesach, the Pasuk says there, Vishi Asha Yoinek Al Chur Posen, which means that the child will be playing on the hole of the snake, of the python. And then Valma Uras Sif Oini, and the another damaging where they live over there, Gumul Yoda Yehoda, so the ant will not to be afraid will play with it, which means that turn around instead of the snakes and the damages to do damage, the person will actually the child will play with them. As oich the nochash, but here we're talking there's another kind of a snake which is Tzifoini, call him the snake, the Tzifoini, it's a horror, but is happening on the Toiv, he's going to turn around to good. And a ha'ora v'gilui derfun vert nimshach b'achrin shel Pesach, and a ray and a shine of this is revealed in Achrin shel Pesach. Was their far is mendan mahader, that's why you are actually careful, b'shuruya, ubechol hamacholim, and all foods. But odi bechina unshash was in matzah shruya, then the worry of matzah shruya verdamot nishapach letoivu kedusha is turned around for good and holy. Und can ois genutzt werden by avodas Hashem, then we can utilize it into service of Hashem. Und euch b'simcha, and also with joy, beginning with the joy of Yom Tov. So you don't have to worry about Matzah Shruya, because all the worries and all the, no more worries. Be happy and rejoicing and utilizing Avodas Hashem. And the Rebbe finds now that halachically, as the Rebbe brings down from the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, that if you extend your meal on Pesach, on Achar Shel Pesach, you're actually you can eat chametz in the end of the meal. He brings down from the Shulchan Aruch. And it's interesting that every down the Mishnah Berurah did rules not to eat chametz after, because well, this, but the Rebbe challenges the Mishnah Berurah very strongly. And the halacha is the Rebbe brings down. We also find it in the revealed part of Torah. Their din is, the halacha is, and bring down in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, as one whose meal extends on the last Motzi Yom Tov, last day of Pesach, of Shvi of Pesach, ad lachar tzeisek chov, until after the stars are out. Mutar lechel chametz besuda. He's allowed to eat chametz in the meal. Av shadayin lo yispalel arvis lo yivdil klal. He didn't daven ma'ariv yet. He didn't make havdalah. He can still eating. And what's going to be? Das heißt, in der Suda von Achron Shel Pesach, in the meal of Achron Shel Pesach, Esther Chometz, he's actually eating Chometz. Koch, as sagt später bei Birchas HaMozen, although he says later on in the benching, but Yom Chag HaMatzis hazeh. So he says Yom Chag HaMatzis hazeh. So the Rebbe brings down, discusses over here, these details, but the fact remains that this is what the halacha is. So you see that you're eating and after eating mamash chametz after this month, and you're saying chagamatz. That is the idea, that there's no rucha tuma, there's no negativity. So chametz is able to be elevated when it comes achron shel Pesach, the gilu of Mashiach. And now the Rebbe is going to bring this down also to an extent, a level also to Shvi Shel Pesach, as the Rebbe brought down before, that Shvi Shel Pesach is the Rishus, is also has me'ain, called the Tikkun Rabbanon, kein der Reise Tikkun, is the Torah, Yudalef is doch Klolus Uprotus Nemra. Torah is in general and specific. So specifically it's Shvi Shel Pesach, but in a general way it's also specifically it's Achron Shel Pesach, but in a general way it's also Shvi Shel Pesach. Well, derech ze b'inyoneinu, similar in our idea, in our matter. Those was a geretli il that we spoken about earlier, as the erste Nacht Pesach is the Yom Tov von Geula Rishonim. That is the redemption of the first Geula, Yitzias Mitzrayim. Und der Siyum von Pesach, Achrische Pesach, is verbunden mit der Geula Hasida. The last day of Pesach is connected with the future redemption. So that's specifically about Achrin Shel Pesach. Between Achrin Shel Pesach and the first day of Pesach. But we can also say the first days and the last days, in other words, the plural, the first days of Pesach and the last day. Is verbunden, is besteht der Chilek Kloli. In general, it's zwischen the erste zwei Yom Tov Tag von Pesach, the first 2 days Yom Tov Pesach, und die letzte zwei Tag Yom Tov and the last 2 days Yom Tov. Das heißt, which means, as euch Shvi shel Pesach, was is der Siyum von Pesach, also Shvi shel Pesach, the 2 days, when this is also the end of Pesach, is Shayich to the Geula HaSida, also has a connection to the future redemption. And Take in Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbe says in the brackets, Eretz Yisrael, does der Siyum Mamish. In Eretz Yisrael, it's Mamish, the conclusion. Men pravet dem Tag die Suda for Mashiach and B'Shvi, for Mashiach B'Shvi Shal Pesach. And on that day, we celebrate the day of the Suda of Mashiach on Shvi Shal Pesach. Wie das kommt euch heraus in them, this can also expresses itself in the fact was davke bekriyas yamsuf, was is given b'shvil shel Pesach, specifically in kriyas yamsuf, which took place on the 7th day of Pesach, is bottle geworden Mitzrayim und Klippas Mitzrayim, that destroyed, negated Mitzrayim and the Klippa of Mitzrayim in them oifen as lein nishar behem ad echad, in the extent that not one was left. But das is me'ein from the mittel hara. This is similar, somewhat, of that negation of the Rabba Avodas HaTuma and the removal of Tuma in Klolus Ha'olam, in the world in general, was V'zayin la'osid lovei, that is going to be in the future. V'esruach HaTuma avir min ha'oretz, when the spirit of impurity are removed from the world. Unazoi is oich benegeya dem Birur Hanitzutz, the Gedusha from Mitzrayim. And so is it also as far as the sorting out of the sparks of Gedusha of Mitzrayim, what takes place on even a Shvi Shel Pesach. As der Shleimus von dem Birur von alle Nitzutzes HaGedusha shel Mitzrayim. When was the completion of all and the sorting out? When did it complete the sorting out of all sparks of Kedusha in Mitzrayim? Was der far leisisifu l'reisom leisisifu, you're never going to see them again because you've already done everything. Is given b'kriyas yamsuf. That took place when the splitting of the sea. Ungedoyle hoisa bizas hayam bizas Mitzrayim. And it was even greater, the spoil that they took from the sea after Kriyas Yamsuf, from the spoil that they took in Egypt. So it means it took out even more sparks. But this is bedugma to Shleimus Habirur. This is similar to the completion of the sorting out from alle Nitzutzes Kedusha Shebechol Olam, from all sparks of Kedusha in all of the world, not just the Mitzrayim finished then, but this is the whole world lost love in the future to come. And the river is by Kriyas Yamsuf given, and that's why by the splitting of the sea was the Gilu Elikus, there was a revelation of godliness in an oifen, in a way, von marin oisoi be'etzba, va'oimer ze keli, you can show with the finger and say, this is keli, and which means a keli van vehu, we said. So we were able to point, there was a tremendous revelation that we can actually point to it. And a maid servant was able to visualize, see on the sea, what even the greatest of the prophets could not see. This too was similar as it's going to be in the future to come. That the glory, honor of Hashem will be revealed. V'ro kol basar yachdav, and all flesh together will see. Va'eshpoich ruchi al kol basar. V'nibo, I will pour my spirit on all flesh. Oich avavodin v'shvachas, even on servants and maidservants, when they will prophesy. So we see the similarity of Shvi Shel Pesach with the Geula Hasida. Unazoi, so we have it, first of all, the revelation that took place. The Shvi Shel Pesach was similar to the Bit Lara, which was going to be in the future. The sorting out of the Nitzutzes in Shvi Shel Pesach was Le'nishim Amadecha, similar to what is going to be in the future when it's going to be a total, complete sorting out of all the sparks. And also, as far as the accomplishment in the world, when Azoy by Kriyas Yamsuf Evgiton in Welt, it also by Kriyas Yamsuf accomplished in the world der Inyan von Ishapcha. Also, the idea of changing, turning things around by Hi Ha'onon v'Ha'choshech by Yoeres Aloylom, the clouds and the darkness was, and it illuminated the night, so that the Onon and the Choshech and godliness, the Eberster by Kriyas Yamsuf by Yoeres Aloylom. Adar Choshech Alein hot meir given. Darkness itself shine bedugma v'dos v'zayin la'osid lovei, similar to where it's going to be in the future to come when Valaylo Kayem Yoyim. The night will shine like the day. B'yesh loymar, we can say as oich der inyan, the shaykhs from Shvi Shel Pesach to the Geula Hasidah, that connection of Shvi Shel Pesach, that this idea of Shvi Shel Pesach to Geula Hasidah is verbunden mit dem Bechinne ve'inyan, is connected to this level and the idea from Achilas Matzah Rishus that we said earlier, that on Shvi Shel Pesach is the main posik that eating matzah is optional. Warum ot di hamshocha v'gilui from Shvi Shel Pesach, this hamshocha and revelation of Shvi Shel Pesach nikra Rishus ve'almud decheru, that's called Rishus, the world of cherus, of freedom, as the Rebbe quotes from the Tzemach Tzedek, and that's why the matzah is Rishus, and I guess mitzvah would be obligatory. This is freedom because it's Rishus, it's optional. Und euch der Eifen Havoide von Rishus, and also this style of service in a way of Rishus is Bedugmas Havoida in the Mizman del Osi. This is similar to the service in the time of the future, when as Vetzain, when it will be Shonim Asher Toimer Ein Libam Chefet, years that you'll say, I have no desire in them. There's no need. There is no, the Gemara in Shabbos says, there's no merit and there's no obligation. It's all free. It's cheru. It's optional. It's not going to be the obligation. Mitzvah b'chlal b'oiseh hazman. That time le'yisham le'rov le'milchama. No hunger, no war, v'le'kina, no jealousy, v'le'tachrus, no competition. Chulu v'le'yiyah eisa kol ha'olam. The entire occupation of the will not be elul adas Hashem levad chulu, just to know Hashem shenemar, as the pasuk says, Kimola oretz deyes havayeh kamayim leyom achasim. The world will be full with knowledge of Hashem as the water covers the sea. This is Mesichas Achron Shel Pesach, Tovshin Chof Zayin, and Tovshin Lamed Zayin.